Very happy to meet you, Jack.
Thank you.
You've been somebody who I've read over a long period of time in my career.
Right.
And I wanted to start off, I was thinking about this morning during the session. This was one of the books,
Approaches and Methods,
Methods in Language Teaching, which I remember reading very early on in my career. And I was wondering, like now, with teacher trainees and the kind of books that they read, I was wondering what kind of things you think would be important for teacher trainees to read now, and whether you'd have a different opinion from what you thought 25 years ago.
Right, because that book was written when there was a lot of interest in methods, and new methods and so on. And so my colleague and I, Ted Rogers, tried to bring a little perspective to that discussion by looking at the history of methods and also trying to sort of deconstruct some of the methods that were being recommended in those days, some of which are still around, some of which are not perhaps. And so we've done a second edition of that book in which we spend less time on those so-called innovative methods and more time on more recent innovations, if you like. These days, I suppose, there are other factors that are really driving the language teaching industry. I mean, in the past, I suppose it was sort of methods and tests, really. Now there's much more an emphasis on outcomes, with things like the Common European Framework. So a much more of a focus on what are appropriate targets to set. Methods perhaps become secondary because once you know what the targets are and where you're aiming, methods are not so important. It's really a question of whether you can get the students to those targets. So that's one thing that has changed, and perhaps there's less interest now in the sort of guru-led kind of methods, if you like, that are very much personality-based and so on, which I think is a good thing, and that was partly the agenda behind writing the book as well.
Would you think that it's important for a teacher trainee to have an understanding of the history of
Yes, I mentioned this morning what I call disciplinary knowledge. Yes, they do need to have some sort of understanding of where language teaching has come from. I don't think they need to have any practical familiarity with a lot of those older methods. And I'm always concerned when people say we use this as the basis of your methods course. That's not an appropriate use of the book, because it's not really a book that's designed to train people in how to teach in the classroom. It's background history of the profession, really. Yep.
And how much emphasis would you put on lesson observation there?
A lot more, of course, because that takes us into the process of classroom teaching. And so when we start focusing on classroom teaching processes, yes, we want to know what goes into a good lesson, what characterizes effective teaching strategies, how do teachers deliver lessons and so on, what principles do they draw on when they teach, and all those kinds of things. I've got my most recent book actually just came out 2 weeks ago. It's on practice teaching, and that I've got some copies here, but I don't think they were at the conference. It looks at novice teachers going through their first teaching experiences, working with expert teachers and cooperating teachers, takes them through the steps of, understanding the context, planning lessons, being observed by an experienced teacher, reflecting on your own lessons, developing an understanding of what effective teaching is, and so on. So that, to me, focuses more on the process of teaching and understanding how to create lessons, drawing on whatever you've been taught, whatever the teaching context is, and whatever you've come up with on your own as a basis for teaching practice, really.
There's a lot of initiation into teaching focuses on what happens within the four walls of the classroom and teaching people the skills, how to teach reading, writing, listening, speaking, vocabulary, how to use whatever technology is around at the moment, and less emphasis on how to become integrated into the culture of the school or seeing. Would you think there should be more emphasis on that?
Well, I think the teaching the skills and all those things, those teachers do need to be confident in handling those aspects of teaching, because that's really where teaching starts from. And then the other things will emerge, I think, as they begin to interact with colleagues, as they understand their students and how the school culture works and so on. Both need to be there, but I think the skills side is very basic, so that teachers go in confident in being able to use materials to teach a grammar lesson or to do pronunciation activities and so on. So teachers do need that repertoire of basic functional skills, which they can then adapt and modify as they follow, if you like, their own intuitions, and as they also adjust, acculturate to the culture of the school and the practices of the school.
And what role do you think teacher associations have to play?
I think they're very important because they enable teachers to network, to learn from each other, to form study groups or and catch up with what's going on in other parts of the country. So I think they're very important. Yeah, networks, and these, of course, these days are often virtual networks, so you don't need to be in the same physical context, but you can interact with teachers all over the world now with some of these virtual teacher forums that are out there. I think they're very, very good for teachers, particularly young teachers can share concerns and how they resolve issues that they encounter and so on. Yeah.
One interesting thing this morning in your talk, finally, you were saying that you wouldn't feel too if you were teaching French or
Indonesian,
that you wouldn't feel too confident with going beyond the
right, no, because of the limitations in my language proficiency. Right, so I was making the point there that with limited language proficiency, teachers are less able to improvise and be creative in a way, more likely to be dependent on books and resources and technology and so on than a teacher. So that was to make the point about the interaction between language proficiency and teaching performance.
I mean, in initial teacher training, could we teach trainees to be more comfortable with improvisation?
I think we should. I mean, so in other words, there's no such thing as a perfect lesson plan. I mean, the lesson plan is just really the beginning of the lesson, and they should, if they have good reasons to modify it and adapt it and change it during the course of the lesson, fine. The important thing is, what are the outcomes you're trying to achieve in the lesson, and did some other outcomes become important as the lesson unfolded? So I don't think a good lesson is necessarily one that followed its lesson plan. A good lesson is one that is created out of the interaction, out of the context, if you like.
I mean, the backwash of the way that people teach according to lesson plans is not to encourage trainees to actually
to be innovative.
To be innovative. I mean, is there a more fluid kind of lesson plan that we could work with that leaves space for?
There should be, because I mean, a lesson plan is, as I say, it is just that. It's a starting point. It's a springboard. But I think it should be regarded as that. And there's no reason, why teachers say, well, I decided to drop this because it just wasn't working, or I felt the students really wanted to go here rather than there. So I think we shouldn't be so prescriptive. We should use that. Okay, here's some. One of the points about lesson planning is the process of making the plan takes you through the material, and it helps you understand the content of what it is you're going to teach. So the lesson plan should be a result of a process. But of course, once you get into the classroom, the lesson may take on a life of its own. So you need to really keep that in mind.
And how do you feel that your research could be used more in practice? Because often a lot of research is written in an academic style,
right,
which is inaccessible to practicing teachers.
That's right.
How do you see?
Well, I think it's the kind of research that is classroom-based and that is based on classroom issues, and then is presented in such a way that makes it accessible to teachers. I was talking to a young Turkish scholar just before lunch and she was asking me, what can I do? I've been doing teacher research and action research as part of the BMA course that I teach, and what can I do with this was her question. And so I was trying to say to her, well, I don't think there's a book there on Turkish teacher research, unless it were to be published in Turkey. But what the message you could get from that would be, how do you use teacher research when you deliver a graduate program? What are the issues that are involved? What are the goals? What teacher research procedures did? So if you constructed that story about how you can use teacher research as part of a teacher education course, that would be something that other people would like to read about. So again, when I'm thinking about my own research or trying to pass on information from other people's research, my concern is, what is the story there that teachers can engage with? How will this connect to what the teacher educators can engage with, or classroom teachers? So that's sort of what I try to do when I write about different topics and when I draw on research to provide books like these for teachers in training.
And the 10 core dimensions that you mentioned this
right.
morning, are they all integrated with each, or are some more?
They are, I suppose. Some of them are important at different times. Some of them are more important in the basic stage. Some come up, the idea of being part of a community of practice. Again, novice teachers may feel that if they are going to join a network of some sort, they may have less to contribute at the beginning stages of the career. They might want to join such a network to listen to more experienced teachers or to have more experienced teachers help them deal with issues and problems that they've encountered. So I suppose they're all important, but the relevance of them will be different depending on where the teacher is in his or her professional development. Yeah.
How do you see, finally, the role of ISTEC or a conference like this with beginner teachers?
Well, I think it helps them see what's out there, what different career paths are possible, because they'll hear presentations by teachers in different situations, and they can see how different teachers have progressed in their careers, what sort of content they teach, what sort of resources. So I think it does open one's eyes to the whole nature of the field, how diverse it is, who's involved. They may have a very limited experience just working in a particular school in a particular context, and I think when they come to a conference like this, while the presentations are important, I think the most important part is networking with other teachers to sort of just learn what's going on and how did you deal with this issue or how did you get where you are. So it's often a source of motivation for young teachers, I think.
Good. Thanks very much, Jack. Thank you.